His eyes didn't move when I finally stepped into the clearing, as if he had already known the exact spot where I would stop. The others didn't speak. They just shifted their weight quietly, subtly, forming a loose, unspoken circle around me. I hadn't said yes. I hadn't said anything at all, but I didn't step back. If you've been here before, then you already know the drill. Please tap the like button and hit subscribe. It really does help us create more of these stories. And if this is your first time here, you picked a good one to start with. Let's begin. The last few steps of the trail were steep enough to make my muscles sting, but I didn't slow my pace. My boots dug into the loose gravel for purchase, my breath coming in steady, controlled rhythm. The cool mountain wind, a welcome sensation on the back of my neck, as I finally crested the final ridge. Dry leaves crunched underfoot, and the late afternoon sunlight caught the edge of my sleeve in a flash of gold. And then there was only quiet. The overlook opened wide and sudden in front of me. The forest fell away into a vast canyon below the ledge, a sea of golden light spilling over the treetops that shifted like waves far beneath me. I had picked this specific trail for its promise of stillness. I was sure no one else would be here, but they were. 3 men were already there. 2 were seated on a long, flat stone slab near the edge of the cliff, and 1 stood with a boot propped casually against a short, weathered log, his hands relaxed at his sides. None of them looked the least bit surprised to see me. The oldest one, the one standing, turned his head slightly, catching sight of me with an easy, unhurried glance, as if they had been expecting someone to show up eventually. "We thought you might need some company," he said, his voice calm and steady, carrying easily on the quiet air. He offered me a metal water bottle, holding it out with the cap already loosened. I paused for a second, my heart just starting to catch up with my pace, the blood pounding in my ears. Then I stepped forward, reached for it without a word, and drank. The water was cold and clean, and it cooled my throat, helping me to catch my breath. I didn't ask why they were there. Whatever the reason, it was clear they were not surprised to see me. The second man, one of those on the stone slab, was watching me now. The third remained quiet, his attention fixed in my direction. There was another flat stone near the overlook, and one of them tapped it lightly with his knuckles, a silent gesture, motioning for me to sit if I wanted. I walked over and sat down. The stone was still warm from the sun. I sat with my legs angled toward the breathtaking view, my hands resting at my sides, the water bottle still cool in my grip. The second man moved first, the one who hadn't spoken yet. He stood up and stepped forward, sitting down on the ground a short distance away from me, just close enough that I was acutely aware of his presence, but not within immediate reach. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. A breeze moved across the overlook, lifting the loose ends of my hair from my shoulders. I tucked a strand behind my ear and glanced toward him. His gaze stayed level with the distant horizon, as steady and quiet as the view itself. "You hiked the north side?" the third man asked from where he still stood by the log. His voice was calmer than I would have expected. Not loud, just present enough to reach me easily. I nodded. "Took the switchbacks past the falls." "That's a quiet stretch," the first one said. He looked over casually, more like someone simply taking in the setting than someone studying me. "I like the calm." The second man was still sitting nearby, a silent, still figure, the sun warming the empty space that separated us. When I adjusted my posture on the rock, he moved slightly too. Maybe he was just settling in more comfortably. "Picture?" the third man asked, lifting his chin toward the stunning overlook. "It's a good spot." I didn't answer him right away, but then I stood, pulled my phone from my side pocket, and handed it over to him. He took it with both hands, his movements careful, and held it up to frame the shot without another word. I turned toward the view, standing just forward of the main ledge. The second man stood up from the ground and positioned himself just behind me. As I adjusted my stance, he leaned slightly to the side, his gaze directed toward my shoulder. "Sun caught your shoulder," he said, his voice low as he brushed off a bit of trail dust near the fabric of my shirt. He gave the edge of the material a quick, deft shake to fix the fold, then immediately stepped back, letting my shirt settle. The shutter on my phone clicked. When I looked down at the phone he handed back to me, he was already stepping away. I smiled a little at the photo. The view was even better than I remembered. As I lowered the phone, its screen still glowing with the image, I held my ground, steadying myself as the wind picked up again. There was no urgency in the moment, only a profound and stretching calm. The breeze shifted, and the man who had first spoken, Elias, leaned to glance past me toward the view, just close enough that I felt the warmth of his presence, but not his touch. My breath caught in my throat for a moment, more from the altitude and the proximity than from the view itself. I didn't look back. The quietest of them, Cole, stepped forward and reached a hand toward my shoulder with a questioning look. He gently brushed something off, a leaf perhaps, and I gave a small, permissive nod. His hand hesitated for a second in the air before pulling back, his expression completely unreadable. Still facing the view, I shifted slightly to the side, acknowledging him with a quiet glance. Elias came nearer too, the one who had greeted me. He didn't say anything now. He simply offered his hand, a casual open gesture, and I took it, shaking it with a slight smile. It was a simple, unhurried motion, his grip steady, without a trace of hesitation. It felt more like the end of a long conversation rather than the start of one. I realized I'd been holding my breath and finally exhaled slowly. I held on a moment longer than necessary, steadying myself. My heartbeat had quickened without me even noticing, and the sound of the wind seemed to fade into the background. Their collective closeness was impossible to ignore, even in the pervasive quiet. I adjusted my stance, suddenly aware of the uneven rock beneath my feet. They repositioned themselves without speaking, nearby but not crowding. They were not crowding me. They were not rushing me. Something about the atmosphere had shifted. It was quieter, more focused. I felt a tension, not of fear but of significance, settle through me from head to toe. My breath came in shallow bursts as I focused on my footing. I exhaled with a small shake of my head, trying to brush off the edge of nerves. The third man, Asher, reached out briefly as if to steady me by the side of my jacket. His hand hovered in the space near my arm for a second before dropping back to his side. I shifted slightly in response, regaining my balance on the uneven stone. The breeze caught the edge of my shirt as I moved, and for a second, it felt like the whole scene was paused. Elias's hand lifted to gesture near my collar, pausing at the center of my chest without making contact. His presence, calm, still. My heartbeat was fast now, but steady. Without thinking, I adjusted my grip on a nearby rock ledge, placing my hand gently there, anchoring myself to something solid. He looked at me once, a quick, assessing glance, then helped me step carefully onto the rock ledge behind me, his hand hovering near the small of my back for balance, his presence a steadying force at my side. I stood there. One of them, I sensed, was behind me, shifting his weight just close enough that I felt surrounded. Asher moved near my side, and I rested my hand briefly against his arm without needing direction or invitation. I didn't step away. I stood perfectly still, acutely aware of where each of them was positioned around me. The silence had changed again, becoming thicker somehow. The air felt dense, heavy, like the atmosphere right before a storm breaks. My breath shifted, growing quieter but remaining steady. One of them adjusted his stance behind me while another reached out to gently tuck a loose strand of hair out of my face. I blinked as the breeze immediately lifted it again. When I opened my eyes, the view was the same, but I was noticing it differently now. The one behind me, Cole, adjusted his stance without drawing my attention, steadying himself beside me, his hands braced lightly on the ground for balance. I held my stance, adjusting slightly as the uneven surface under my boots shifted. In front of me, Elias reached up, his hand pausing near my chin, waiting. He didn't move. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, the air between us still charged with unspoken energy. The tension shifted. I let out a slow breath, trying to stay grounded. Agit! I noticed the shift in them. One steadying his balance nearby, another's arm brushing my elbow briefly as I adjusted my own arm for balance. My hand moved instinctively and touched someone's shoulder as I steadied myself. In that moment, it didn't matter whose it was. They stood close now, quietly and deliberately positioned around me. I became aware of my own heartbeat, a fast but steady rhythm in the overwhelming stillness. Even with everything around me so quiet, I felt more awake and alive than I had in a very long time. I couldn't tell if I was moving forward into something or just caught, suspended in the moment. I caught a flicker of movement beside me, someone adjusting their stance near my side. A hand lifted briefly, the fingers brushing the air near my face before pulling back. I blinked hard, pausing for a moment before opening my eyes again. I became aware of just how close they were, each one standing near, forming a loose, silent circle around me in the quiet of the overlook. They didn't speak. They simply waited, giving me the space to move on my own time. My chest rose and fell unevenly. My breathing slowed from how long I had stayed so still. Something changed. I felt it, a subtle but clear shift in the energy. I started to speak, to ask a question, but the words didn't quite form. One of them gently took my hand and placed it near his own side. A steady, grounding touch. Another leaned closer, their forehead nearly brushing mine in a gesture of quiet solidarity. I stopped trying to track where each one of them stood and just became aware of the collective calm that surrounded me. I found myself off balance for a moment, catching myself just before I tipped. My knees trembled, and I reached out for balance where I could find it. They moved quietly again, behind, beside, in front, settling into new positions without a single word passing between them. It wasn't fast, it wasn't random. Every movement felt deliberate, as if they all understood a silent choreography. The quiet between us felt held, like something precious waiting to unfold. I didn't shift away. I found something solid in front of me and held on. My fingers tightened around the fabric of a shirt, anchoring me to whatever was steady. My chest rose and fell with the quiet tension. I tilted my head slightly, feeling the cool wind against the back of my neck. There was movement behind me, subtle, quiet, but close enough to notice. One of them lifted a hand slightly, then lowered it again without touching. Another stood nearby, still and attentive, giving me room to stay balanced. I kept my hold on the nearest support, steadying myself without thinking. In that moment, it didn't matter who stood where, only that I felt completely and utterly surrounded. I felt the tension rise in my shoulders, my breath coming short as I tried to stay centered. One of them murmured something too soft to catch, his voice a low vibration in the stillness. I didn't need to hear it. Whatever it was, the moment didn't need words. And in that space, with no need to move, I stayed, still in the quiet. Now, be honest. If you were standing where she was, still surrounded, waiting, would you have stayed too, or would you have stepped away? Let me know in the comments. I'll be reading.
Thank you for listening. Please share your thoughts, like this video if you found it helpful, and subscribe for more.